Buddy, and welcome to today's video. Today is Wednesday, August 5th. We are now 90 days away exactly until the elections in November, the presidential elections, a number of very, very big Senate elections, and of course, as always, the House of Representatives in its entirety is up for re-election. So you know the drill. We're going to go all 50 states, break them down for you, and eventually we will get to your individual state and comment down in the suggestions below if you have any questions. Beginning, obviously, in the state of Hawaii, very safe Democratic state. We have virtually nothing to talk about there. A poll came out just today that had Joe Biden up by over 25 points. In the state of Alaska, interestingly enough, the Senate race here between Al Gross and Dan Sullivan has been much kinder to the Republican Party than the presidential race has. And that typically does not happen in Alaska. Typically, the Democratic Party is able to outperform the presidential races in this state. But so far, for whatever reason, the Democrats are having a much better time campaigning against Donald Trump than they are against Dan Sullivan, who, of course, recently had that rather embarrassing gaffe where he posted a picture of himself with Elijah Cummings while making a tribute to the now late John Lewis. So all in all, I'm going to put this as a likely Republican state, but something to watch because the Democrats have come within a few points in a couple of polls here. Washington, very safe state for the Democrats, obviously has been the site of a number of big protests since the murder of George Floyd. Coincidentally, my mouse, oddly enough, how about that, lands exactly in the Minneapolis area, just as I say that, totally inadvertent. But in Washington, that is exactly what has been happening, and it's going to solidify this state as even more safe of a Democratic state than it otherwise would be. Same thing in Oregon, nothing to really discuss here. It's been a long time since this was, for a little while, considered a swing state. Republicans have had a senator here within the last 20 years, but nothing to really discuss here. California, Joe Biden leads Donald Trump by almost 40 points in this state now. If I could make a whole nother level of safety for Joe Biden in this state, I would. He has absolutely nothing to worry about there. Now, in the state of Nevada, the Republican Party, for whatever reason, is pouring a lot of money into this state. I can't really see why, because they're getting just pounded in the rest of the actual swing states. And furthermore, even when Nevada was a swing state, 10 or so years ago, it was a state that the Democrats still had a little bit of, it still kind of, leaned their way, kind of the way North Carolina sometimes will lean to the right, whereas Nevada will typically lean leftward, and it only became more so in the last 4 years after Hillary Clinton won in Nevada, and Catherine Cortez Masto was joined in the Senate by Jackie Rosen, who ousted incumbent Dean Heller. The Democrats also flipped the governorship from red to blue in this state. So I'm not going to label it safe just because the margins will probably be somewhat tight, but I'm going to label it likely. Idaho, very safe in this cycle. Whoops. There we go. In the state of Montana. Now, obviously, this is another state that we've discussed many times, the kind of strange dichotomy that we see here on the state level versus the presidential level, in that on the presidential level, this is a very, very safe Republican state, and on the state level, it's much more competitive. There has not been a Republican governor since 2000 in the state of Montana, 3 straight Democratic administrations in the state. However, as of now, it looks like the Republicans are going to be able to win that back, as so far Greg Gianforte is defeating Mike Cooney, the current lieutenant governor. Meanwhile, Steve Bullock, who is the current governor and running for Senate, is so far losing to Steve Daines. For a while, he was ahead of him, but our most recent poll had Daines up by 6 points, which was not something the Democrats wanted to see, because this is a state that they feel very optimistic about, that they can pick up a senator here, and this would go a long way towards them potentially picking up the Senate majority. But on the presidential level, it's safe. Wyoming, very safe state for the Republicans. Utah, same thing, even though certain polls have shown Donald Trump leading by a much lower margin in this state than in Wyoming. It's still very safe. Arizona, here's the first big swing state of the evening. For many years was a big Republican stronghold. I believe it has not gone to the Democratic Party, I believe since 92. But there are now more Democrats in the House of Representatives than Republicans in the state of Arizona. As we know, Phoenix is the biggest and fastest growing city in America. Not biggest, of course, but biggest growing, if that makes any sense. And the Democrats, as we know, picked up a senator here 2 years ago when Kyrsten Sinema was able to oust Martha McSally, who of course is now being challenged again, this time by Mark Kelly, the former um, astronaut. And so far, what we're seeing is the Democratic Party is thoroughly winning this Senate race. This is a big, big pickup opportunity for them. The others being, as we mentioned, Montana. Colorado's another big one. Maybe an outside shot in Kansas. They have a shot in Iowa. They have a sort of an outside shot in Georgia. They have a definite shot in North Carolina and a shot in Maine. But right now in Arizona, they're looking very, very good to pick up this Senate seat and have two Democratic senators from the state of Arizona. And to achieve that in only 2 election cycles is very, very impressive for the Democrats. And right now, even though Joe Biden is underperforming in comparison to Mark Kelly, he's still leading Donald Trump. And so right now, I'm going to label this as a lean Democrat. The margin, supposing that Joe Biden will win the state, I imagine will be in a lean column. But here we are now, 90 days. We're making these videos for about 6 or 8 weeks now, and we continuously have this state in blue. These 11 votes that Hillary Clinton didn't get that are now in Joe Biden's camp. And for all this noise about the Rust Belt, this is basically another Wisconsin. So he's picked up these double-digit vote totals here without even touching Wisconsin yet. So this is a huge pickup for Joe Biden. And Donald Trump, with so many states to go, obviously a lot of swing states, a lot of states that he did win in 2016, though, as we're going west to east, you can see he's already in some trouble. He didn't help himself and get in any better position in the state of Nevada, and he's already down 11 in Arizona. In the state of New Mexico, some evaluators and some of the analysts still actually label this as a swing state. I don't personally. This is a safe Democratic state. All you need to know about this state is that there's an open Senate race here, and it looks like the Democrats are going to win it by potentially 15 or even more points. Ben Ray Lujan is easily going to win this Senate seat. It was another state that the Democrats managed to flip the governorship from red to blue. And remember, the Republican governor at the time of New Mexico was hardly even a Republican. Very, very moderate Republican who worked with the legislature to pass a number of progressive bills. And so by and large, this is a safe state. In Colorado, another state in which there's a big Senate race here, John Hickenlooper, the former governor and former presidential candidate, very short-lived presidential candidate, is running against the incumbent Cory Gardner, who, of course, has long been known to vote with Donald Trump a vast majority of the time. This time around, it looks like John Hickenlooper is going to be able to prevail in that Senate race. And so that is sort of that second pickup opportunity for the Democrats, the other being in Arizona. And so on the presidential level, I don't see any reason to believe Joe Biden is going to have much trouble here. There's another 9 votes for him. And as you can see with that, he's now over 100 at 109. And then the state of North Dakota, of course, Democrats have had 2 recent senators here. Kent Conrad represented the state for many, many years, and then Heidi Heitkamp shortly after that. But on the presidential level, very, very safe Republican states. South Dakota, of course, when the Democrats had that gigantic Senate majority back in 2008, Tim Johnson was in the Senate from there. The South Dakota Democratic Party, as I've mentioned many times on this channel, is one of the best state parties for either the Republican or Democratic Party in the entire country. They do a very, very good job across the board. And in the state of South Dakota, I do not think that the Republicans have really anything to worry about. So they're going to be just fine. Same with Mike Rounds. In the state of Nebraska, very safe Republican state. State of Kansas. Now, this is a state worth watching on election night because, as we mentioned, that Senate race is very important. And, of course, Chris Kobach managed to pick up he lost that primary to Roger Marshall, which was a huge sigh of relief for the Republicans. So, even though Joe Biden might do a little better than people think here, I still expect Donald Trump to rather easily carry this state. Oklahoma was a state he carried every single county in 2016. Nothing to discuss. All right, here's another big one, Texas. Obviously, with its 38 electoral votes, you just know with a number that big, the Democrats are going to have a chance because with a number that big, there are going to be a number of urban areas. But for many years, this was sort of the Republican Party's California. This was sort of the state that the Republican Party had as its biggest source of votes and could kind of springboard them to potentially winning in the Electoral College. And 2016 was no different. However, this time around, as you can tell, by all the polling, including a new poll that came out just today, Joe Biden is not just competitive in the state of Texas, he may damn well win the state of Texas. Now that I think I think people need to pump the brakes on the state of Texas, sort of quote unquote suddenly becoming a blue state or even really a purple state. I think it's very possible that we could see. I think it's very possible that we could see, this state continue to narrow up each election cycle. Remember, the Democrats came pretty close to defeating Ted Cruz in 2018. Beto O'Rourke came very close. 48.3% of the vote is what he got. But at the end of the day, the Democrats had a rather moderate candidate who was known to be an extremely, charismatic politician who generated a ton of buzz around the state, famously visited every single county, and he was running against a very unpopular senator in Ted Cruz, and he still lost, okay? And he still lost by by around 2 points. So, that pretty much gives the game away as far as, who is, whether or not the Democrats actually have that big of a chance here. However, it's just whether or not they have it long term. And I think that Donald Trump is probably just going to be able to squeak this one out. I'm still not quite ready to label this tilt Democrat, but I will tell you, I'm getting pretty close because another poll came out that was held between July 24th and August 2nd by Morning Consult, which is a respected pollster that had Joe Biden by 1 point. Another Morning Consult poll had Biden up by 2 points. Another one had him down by 7. That was held back in May. But a variety of pollsters have Joe Biden either barely losing in a statistical tie or barely leading Donald Trump. So I think Trump will still pull this one out, but I imagine that Joe Biden is going to get very, very close and is going to really make Donald Trump sweat. And this is a problem kind of for both parties, but really for the Republicans, because they're kind of panicking and having to throw a ton of money into this state. I wouldn't be surprised if the Democrats make another strong push for the Senate seat in 2024. The other senator, John Cornyn, is being challenged by MJ Hager this time around, but she does not appear to be in position to win that race, whereas it looked like Beto O'Rourke might actually have an outside chance to do so. So for now, I'm still labeling it tilt Republican, but stay tuned. Minnesota was a state that the Republicans thought they could target for a little while, but not really anymore. This has slipped from out of their grasp as if they ever really had a grasp on it. There were 3 statewide races in this state in 2018. The Democrats took all 3 of them. Tina Smith, Amy Klobuchar, Tim Walz all soundly defeated their opponents. And Tina Smith is running again, this time for her first full 6-year term, and is doing pretty well. She continuously leads by double digits, and the times that she doesn't, she leads by 8 or 9. So this is going to be a pretty easy retention for the Senate and for the Democratic Party. And the side, of course, of the Minneapolis protests is really only going to favor the Democratic Party. And so this is another opportunity that the Republicans felt they had. They kind of targeted 20 electoral votes between Minnesota, Nevada, and New Hampshire as states that they felt they actually had a chance to pick up and further make this an even tougher lift for the Democrats. But they're not going to win any of these states. Even though I know I have Nevada as likely, that's pretty much a safe retention for the Democrats. So I'm actually going to label this safe Democrat. Now in the state of Iowa, the Democratic Party has strangely not really been able to break through in this state. And what I mean by that is this was sort of a state that you would kind of initially think of as a pickup opportunity for the Democrats because, it's such an elastic state. And as we know, it's a state in which, the Democratic Party typically can do a pretty good job in terms of getting House members elected. There are 4 House seats in the state of Iowa. 3 of them are controlled by Democrats. And of course, the 4th one for many, many years was controlled by Steve King. And he was, of course, primaried out. So, all told, the Democratic Party is not exactly performing on the presidential level the way they would like. And our most recent poll had Joni Ernst leading Teresa Greenfield in the Senate race here for the first time, basically throughout this campaign cycle. So all in all, I still expect Donald Trump to win this state, even though I think it'll tighten up. So I imagine this will be, I'm going to put this as a tilt Republican because I think that's going to be the final margin. The Senate race is going to be even closer, if not a win for the Democrats. Missouri has long been a state that the Democrats have sort of been dark horses in. Remember, Barack Obama came pretty close to winning this state back in 2008. Wasn't nearly as close 4 years later. But Claire McCaskill was defeated by Josh Hawley back in 2018. That was one of 4 flips that the Republicans made, even though it was kind of a disappointing year for them because they failed to get Democrats ousted in Montana, in Ohio, in West Virginia, among others, Wisconsin, Michigan. Missouri was one that they were able to pull the trigger and win. They were also able to get a flip in North Dakota. They were able to get a flip in Indiana and a flip in Florida. Mike Parson is probably not going to lose his governorship bid. And, I think Joe Biden, will probably, again, narrow this up. Donald Trump's not going to win this state by quite as big a margin, but I'm going to label it likely as opposed to safe, which was what it was 4 years ago. Arkansas, safe Republican state. Amazing how quickly that state has shifted. Louisiana will also be a safe Republican state. All right, now in the state of Wisconsin, obviously one of the big Rust Belt states. The Democrats have officially canceled their convention in person up there. Joe Biden will not be accepting the nomination in Wisconsin. The Democrats have seen a lot of positive signs here over the past couple of years. Real early on in Trump's term, I believe it was his first year, there was a state Senate special election that a Democrat won in a district that no Democrat had won in decades. That was the first sign of a shift. And the next sign was in 2018, Scott Walker, who, of course, is a very popular not amongst his own constituents, but just popular nationally as in very well known, and a Republican of some note and consequence, was defeated by Tony Evers. That was a big win for the Democratic Party. And then Tammy Baldwin was also able to easily win her re-election bid by 11 percentage points. So right now, polling also shows that the Democrats are in a big advantage here, about 6.5 point lead for Joe Biden, which, of course, I can hear you Hillary supporters already typing out mean comments about this. This was a state in which we saw that big polling shift on election night. People like to talk about how wrong, quote unquote, the polls were. They were really only wrong in this state. And if you apply the same shift right now that we saw in election night in 2016, Joe Biden not only still wins, but let's not forget that a lot of these pollsters have adjusted their theology and adjusted their methods. And so right now I have this as a lean Democrat. And don't be surprised if Joe Biden comes out and wins this by 6 or 8 points, because I think right now what we're seeing is the Democratic Party is having a field day across this portion of the country. Illinois, very safe Democratic state. Dick Durbin is not going to have any problems himself in his reelection bid. Kentucky, safe Republican state. Tennessee, safe Republican state. Mississippi, the Democratic Party is in not quite as bad a position as they used to be. Obviously, the highest minority population in the country, a state in which there's another Senate race here. Mike Espy is giving it a rematch against Cindy Hyde-Smith. I do not expect him to win. But it's just worth keeping somewhat of an eye on because Mike Espy did a pretty good job last time. He got over 45% of the vote. So just because of that, I'm going to label it likely, just based on a margin. It's probably not going to end up being that close, though. In the state of Michigan, the Republican Party has all but waved the white flag in this state, which is just amazing to me to think about. This was one of the biggest flips on election night and was integral to Donald Trump winning the election. But since then, similarly to Wisconsin, there have been 2 statewide races that the Democrats have taken. By the way, in Wisconsin, I forgot to mention the Supreme Court race that the Democrats rather surprisingly also won. In the state of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer easily defeated Bill Shute, the Republican candidate for governor, who, of course, is replacing the outgoing governor. And so the Democrats managed to get this state governed again by a Democrat. They had some success in the state legislature as well, still controlled by Republicans, but they had some success there. And then Debbie Stabenow was able to withstand a challenge from John James and win. Now, John James is again trying to defeat the other Democratic senator, that being Gary Peters. But Gary Peters so far is having no problems defeating Debbie Stabenow. And any sort of convention bump that was going to be seen for John James, because he was set to speak there at the convention, has been lost. So right now I have this as likely Democrat because let's not forget either that the Republicans have already yanked their ads out of the state of Michigan. That tells you all you need to know about what they think the state of the race is. So speaking of state of the race, remember Hillary Clinton came up 38 votes short of 270. Joe Biden has already, in this model, flipped 37 votes that Hillary Clinton did not get 4 years ago. In the state of Indiana, very little to discuss here. I'm labeling that safe. Mike Pence is going to put it over the top as if it was really in question for Donald Trump. Alabama, kind of the same thing. Doug Jones is in all likelihood going to be defeated by Tommy Tuberville, and I fully expect the Republicans to sweep this state on election night. Okay, now we're going to switch gears and go south to north here. In the state of Florida, obviously it very frequently comes down to this state, just as it did in 2000. And it kind of, in a way, did in 2016. Joe Biden is going to have to bring this state back for the Democrats after they won it in 2008 and 2012, after they lost it in both 2000 and 2004. The Republicans did pretty well in 2018 after narrowly defeating Hillary Clinton in this state 4 years ago. They managed to keep the governorship. 4 Republican governors in a row of the state of Florida: Charlie Crist, Ron DeSantis, Rick Scott, and Jeb Bush, not in that order. The Democrats managed to get a couple of House seats flipped, U.S. House seats down in the South Florida area. But let's not forget that also Bill Nelson, a longtime Democrat from the state, lost to Rick Scott. Okay, so, the Republicans had a pretty nice showing in this state, but the polling averages for Joe Biden are just incredible in this state right now. The Democratic Party has also made it known that they have over now a 500,000 voter by mail registration edge over the GOP. That is going to be significant. And of course, Donald Trump kind of put his foot in his mouth when he suddenly started to encourage vote by mail in the state of Florida. So as of now, I expect Florida to go to Joe Biden, and I'm going to label this likely Democrat. For the first time on this channel, I'm characterizing this as a likely Democratic state, and that tells you pretty much all you need to know about where this night is going. Georgia. Joe Biden is going to be very competitive in this state, much more competitive than Jon Ossoff will be. I mean, this sort of buzz about Jon Ossoff, potentially beating David Perdue, I really don't put too much stock in that. The Democrats very, very frequently come close, but no cigar in the state of Georgia. This Senate race will be no different. I do not expect Jon Ossoff to defeat David Perdue. I know we've seen a poll, here and there, a couple, maybe 1 or 2 polls a month that show Jon Ossoff leading Perdue by a point or two, but by and large, he's not going to win. Joe Biden will come closer, but I also think he's going to be short, especially considering he's all but decided not to pick Keisha Lance Bottoms or Stacey Abrams as his vice presidential running mate. So I'm going to put this as tilt Republican, but it's possible that this could creep up to lean Republican. State of South Carolina, I'm going to label it safe, but it might end up as a likely margin just because turnout in the Senate race is going to be high. Jamie Harrison is narrowing that Senate race up a little bit. I'm not saying he's yet in a position where he could potentially win it, but he is narrowing it up. It's just worth mentioning. But Donald Trump is going to be just fine. Okay, big one here in the state of North Carolina. This was another state that Donald Trump really didn't have much of a problem in. But what kind of went unnoticed, though, in 2016 is the amount of states that Donald Trump won with pluralities. He won in Florida with a plurality, in Arizona with a plurality, in North Carolina with a plurality, among others. And so this time around, he really needs to get that majority because there aren't third and fourth party candidates that are going to suck up as much as the vote as we saw last time between Gary Johnson and Jill Stein. And so, not to mention, Joe Biden is known to be very popular with the African American community. Meanwhile, Roy Cooper, who is one of the most popular governors of either party in the country in his own state, is up again for re-election. He is easily going to defeat Dan Forest, the Republican challenger. That's probably going to give Joe Biden a little bit of a boost. Furthermore, I expect we should all expect that there are 2 House districts in the southern portion of the state here along the South Carolina border that are expected to flip from red to blue. There's also a huge Senate race here between Cal Cunningham and the incumbent Republican Thom Tillis. And as of now, the Democratic Party looks like they're going to win that seat. And that's a huge result for them as they look to take the Senate majority. Right now, I have this as lean Democrat. And so far, Joe Biden is basically sweeping the nation in swing states. If Iowa, Trump won it by a big enough margin in 2016 where I'm not really going to consider this a swing state. And in Georgia, it's possible that you could consider that a quote-unquote swing state victory, but it's always tilted Republican. But meanwhile, Biden has won in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida. State of Virginia has become a safe Democratic stronghold. Not for many years now have the Republican Party been able to pick up a win in this state. It's not going to change this time. Mark Warner, the incumbent Democratic senator, is also going to win. The Democrats, for the first time in a while, also have control of the entire state legislature. West Virginia, very safe Republican state, nothing to discuss. Now, in the state of Ohio, the Democratic Party has talked about this, because this was kind of similar to Iowa in that it went for Donald Trump by such a big margin that nobody really expected Joe Biden to have much of a chance here. I think people expected it to narrow up just because Donald Trump is so unpopular. But as of August 5th, the 538 average has Joe Biden up by 0.2%. That's not even really a lead, but it's worth mentioning because he's basically tied. And the most recent poll that was conducted between July 21st and 23rd has Joe Biden up by 2 points. The one recently before that was released on August 3rd, conducted before that, had Biden up by 4 points. So, it's trending the Democratic Party's way. And so even though the Democrats have a narrow lead here right now, I'm actually going to still leave this as a tilt Republican state. But watch out for Ohio, because the Democratic Party might pick this one up. And also Mike DeWine, the Republican governor, whose approval ratings are soaring as he handles the coronavirus pandemic. A lot of parallels have been drawn between him and Joe Biden, and it's possible that those independent voters who may sort of identify as Democrats on many issues, but are pro-life Democrats or are very Catholic, might side with Joe Biden in this race, as they were obviously very attracted to Mike DeWine, whose approval ratings soar. So keep an eye on Ohio. And that's basically, if Donald Trump wanted any chance of winning this election at this point, given what the remaining states are, he had to win Ohio, and he's done that. Now, in the state of Maryland, that's a safe Democratic state, another double-digit win for Joe Biden, and we can't, of course, forget about D.C., the most liberal area in the United States. There's another 3 votes for Joe Biden. So as you can see, he's only 35 votes away, whereas Donald Trump needs to come up with 66 votes. And his last chance is pretty much going to come here in Pennsylvania. However, again, the polling shows that Joe Biden is winning here in the state of Pennsylvania. Tom Wolf, the governor, easily won re-election in 2018. Bob Casey, the incumbent senator, easily won re-election in 2018. Some House districts on the state level flipped from Republican to Democrat. The Joe Biden campaign so far has made much more of an effort to focus on these 3 states, the Rust Belt, than Hillary Clinton ever did in 2016. And because of that, right now, I'm labeling that as likely Democrat. Scranton Joe, Scrappy Scranton Joe, as they call him, that basically pushes Joe Biden onto the doorstep of victory. Because in the state of Delaware, the state he represented for many, many years in the Senate, that's going his way. New Jersey, nothing to discuss there. And there he is. He's over 270 now. State of New York, there's virtually nothing to discuss there. That puts him over 300. Connecticut, nothing to discuss. Rhode Island, nothing to discuss. Massachusetts is worth mentioning just because of the competitive Democratic Senate primary, but that's it. Vermont, nothing to discuss. Now, in the state of New Hampshire, it is worth mentioning because, of course, this was the closest state this is the closest state out of any in 2016. Hillary Clinton barely won this race. And then, of course, the Democrats barely won this Senate race back in 2016 with Maggie Hassan. Jeanne Shaheen, the other Democratic senator, she is up for re-election, but so far she's doing just fine. I believe it's Kelly Ayotte who's running against her. That's not going to be much of a race. It is worth watching in 2022 on the Senate level because the Republicans might be able to pick up that Senate race when Maggie Hassan is up again. They could throw the incumbent governor Chris Sununu at her. So worth mentioning there. But as of now, safe Democrat for Joe Biden. And then Maine, I'm actually going to give all 4 electoral votes to Joe Biden, just as I gave all 5 rather, of Nebraska's votes to Donald Trump. But it's very possible. I think it's more likely that Joe Biden wins the 1 vote here than Donald Trump will be able to win the 1 vote there. So if you look at this map, Joe Biden managed to flip, let's do the math here, 87 votes. No, 102 votes. If you had in North Carolina, that Hillary Clinton was not able to get 102 electoral votes flipped from Republican to Democrat. You can see this big blue wall up here in the northeast portion of the country, and then the West Coast easily picked up by the Democrats. All the big double-digit states, with the exceptions of Georgia, Ohio, and Indiana, and Tennessee, went blue. So in this model, you can see this is the state of the race right now. Donald Trump is in a heap of trouble, and let's not act like it's not possible that he could lose Georgia, he could lose Texas, he could lose Iowa, and he could lose Ohio. And in fact, I'm just going to put it this way. Let's see what this could look like in the event that he loses these states. Texas very well and could go blue. And as of now, the polling average would have Joe Biden in this tilt win, putting him at 372. Ohio is where he currently stands on a tilt win. That puts him at 390. Okay, and he's currently just barely down in these two states. But as of now, as we mentioned, we're going to label this tilt, and we're going to label this tilt. So there's your final tally, 334 to 204. Thank you guys again so much for watching this video. We're only 90 days away now. This thing is less than 3 months away. And obviously, this election is, going to show up much quicker than you think, as it's right around the corner. So again, thank you so much for watching this video. Please comment down in the suggestions below. Hit the subscribe button and the like button if you haven't already. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you in November.